In this video, we'll look at how you can call Node services defined at the project level in your web applications. So Node modules, Node services are written in server-side JavaScript, and you can see over here basically we have a very simple Node service called hello.js. So you can see that the file name is hello.js, so that means that this service is called the hello service, and this is standard Node JavaScript code over here. Basically it starts out by doing an exports handler, and this is all documented if you read up on how to build Node applications. The key point about this particular Node service here is that you can see that it's referencing variables called packet.firstname and packet.lastname. So packet is a pointer to the input parameters that you pass in when you call this service, and this particular service does nothing very fancy. It just simply emits a string that uses the first name and last name that were passed in, and it also basically writes the value out to the console. So in Node applications, writing debugging code to the console is a key aspect of how you can debug your Node application. So this is our Node service here called hello, and if we go back to our web project here, we can see that in the web project there's a folder called Node, and this service needs to be put in a specific place in the web project folder. So if we open up Windows Explorer here, we can see that basically in our web project there's our Node folder, and then inside that Node folder we have another subfolder called Node _ services, and this is where you would need to actually write your Node file. So this is where the hello.js service lives. So all of the services that you add need to be in this Node services folder inside the Node folder inside your web project. So in this case we actually have two services here, one called alpha DAO example and another called hello. So now let's go back to alpha and see how we can call that service first from the interactive window. So from the interactive window we can call a new function called node request, which executes this Node service. So from the interactive window I'm going to go here and define an arbitrary dot variable. So I'll just go here and say dim p 2 as p, and then inside this dot variable I'm going to define the arguments that I would like to pass to my Node service. So recall that this Node service had first name and last name as arguments. So I'll go here and say p2 dot first name equals Harry, and p2 dot last name equals Jones. And now from the interactive window, Node request, the service that we're calling is called the hello service, and the data that we're passing in is p2. So go ahead there, and you can see there's my response that I got back from this Node service, and the response comes back as a JSON string. So this is actually a JSON string with a property called error, which in this case is empty, and then another property called result, which is the actual data that is returned by this Node service. So I can go here, for example, and pass that. So I can just say JSON equals, and then let's do that. And now I can say dim pj as p, and then pj equals JSON pass of JSON. And now I can say pj dot error, which should be empty, and pj dot result, which is the result that we got back from our Node request. So now let's take a look at some of the other options in the JSON pass function. So I'll pause and pick this up in the next video. So we're continuing now looking at the new Node request function, which allows you to call Node services that are defined at the web project level. So let's now go and make a change to our Node file over here and get rid of the prefix there, and just make it say hello, and then save it. And now go back to the interactive window and rerun our Node request. And what we see is that even though we've edited the Node file, basically the Node is still executing the old file, and that's because Node is caching the Node services. So when you want to make a change to a file and you're debugging, the Node request has a second third parameter here called restart node. So I'm going to go ahead here and say .t dot, and now when I run it, you can see now that basically we pick up the change. So this is obviously only to be used in debug mode, because restarting the node service takes a little bit of time. In a production application you wouldn't need to do that. And so now, having done that, if I basically get rid of that flag, you can see now that it runs instantaneously, and it shows the correct value. So notice also in our Node application here in this, we were using console.log, but I didn't actually see the console window when I was running the code. So if we go back to our Node request function here, we'll see that in addition to the restart node, there's another option called show command window. So I'm going to go ahead here and say .t dot, and now when I run this, you'll see there's the Node console window that opened up, and showing up in the console is whatever we wrote in console.log. So this the ability to write to the console window while your Node code is executing is really helpful, because this is typically how Node applications are debugged, by writing information to the console. So now that we've seen how we can call into Node from the interactive window, we can now see how we can use this in a real application. So we have over here a UX component, and this UX component does nothing other than make a callback to the alpha server. So you can see here's our button called callback to Node, and what this function does is an AJAX callback that is calling an XBasic function called XB. And then if we go look inside this XBasic function over here, we see that this XBasic function is in turn calling in to Node by using the Node request function. And what this function is doing is reading the data in these two controls, first name and last name, and passing them to the Node request. And then finally what we're doing is we have some static text over here with a div, an ID of message 1, and in our XBasic function we're going to basically put the result from the Node request in that in that div. So let's go ahead now and run this. So here we are running the UX component, and then we'll click this button that makes the AJAX callback, calls into the Node service, and you can see there's the response from the Node service, and there's the message. So let's go here and just type in, say, King, make the callback to Node, and there's the response from the Node service, and there's the data over there. So what we've shown in this video is how you can now basically extend your applications by writing Node services that you define at the project level, by putting these the Node code in a special folder in your web project, and then calling the Node services in your application from your AJAX callbacks. And of course, the benefit of being able to call into Node is the huge ecosystem of Node modules that exists. Thanks very much for watching.